According to the Department of Labor, I believe inflation was annualized was 5% in May. I know you're not clairvoyant, but you're experienced. Where do you think inflation will be at the end of this year?
Well, let me go to 2022.
No, if you could go to the end of 2021 first for me.
So I believe that my expectation, although there's a lot of uncertainty, is that the monthly data, the data that would pertain to what happened in a given month, that those numbers will come down.
But by the end of this year, do you expect the inflation to be more than 5% or less?
I believe that the monthly numbers are likely to generate annual inflation rates. If you take the monthly number and ask what would inflation be if it continued at that pace for a year, I believe that will come down toward 2%. But typically inflation rates...
Secretary, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my question was pretty simple. Right now in May, on an annualized basis, we both know what that means. Inflation was 5%. I know you're not clairvoyant, but where do you think it will be at the end of this year?
So the type of inflation number that you're talking about compares the level of prices this month with what they were a year prior.
That's correct.
And that's different than what happened over the span of the month.
I understand that, but I'm asking
By the end...
I'm asking you,
inflation...
based on a year ago, this is not a complicated question. I'm not trying to be rude, but this is not a complicated question. We're at 5% now, based on where it was a year ago. So now we know what we're both talking about.
For the rest of
will it be higher at the end of this year, or will it be less?
12 months, I believe it will come down.
You think it'll be less by the end of this year?
Than 5%, yes.
Okay. What makes you think that?
Because I believe that as the economy is opening up again, prices that fell enormously at the beginning of the pandemic are returning now back toward normal levels. And so what we're seeing in these year-over-year comparisons is of prices which are now reasonably normal, or in many cases at levels that are still somewhat below normal. We're comparing those levels with highly depressed prices the year before.
And that will... I've just got a limited amount of time, Madam Secretary. If you think in 5% inflation in May, and you think it'll be less at the end of the year,
yes,
then why did the Federal Reserve announce that it was going to thought they were going to have to move their interest rate increases sooner and faster than what they had originally expected?
Well, I don't really want to comment on the Fed, but I would simply say that is not an announcement that they made.
Well, the market sure reacted. Sounds like the Federal Reserve's worried about inflation.
I would just refer you to the comments that Chair Powell made in testifying yesterday and at his press conference.
Well, but I'm talking about the action the Federal Reserve took. The Federal Reserve met recently and they said, look, we know we told you this, but things have changed. And we're now telling you that we're likely to have to raise rates sooner and faster, let me just finish, than we originally told you. Why do you think they did that? Because they're concerned about inflation, aren't they?
That is not what they did. Several individuals wrote down in their own individual forecasts, which were published, that they saw it appropriate to raise rates sooner than previously.
Why then did the Federal Reserve last week raise the interest rate on excess reserves?
That's a technical adjustment that they made because the federal funds rate had fallen to the very bottom of their target range, and it was a purely technical adjustment. Look, it's not appropriate for me to discuss Fed policy.
Well, sir,
I don't
no
want to
disrespect,
comment
but
on.
It is. I'm not asking you to make Fed policy. I'm asking your opinion. And usually when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates on excess reserves, they're trying to contract the money supply.
No,
The reason they're trying to contract the money supply is because they're worried about inflation.
It's a purely technical adjustment. They made clear in that the stance of monetary policy has not changed at all, but because short-term overnight rates were drifting to the very bottom of their target range, they made small adjustments.
Okay. Let me stop
Policy
you because
rates.
I've only got a minute left. Here's my worry, Madam Secretary, and I hate to have to interrupt you, but we only have so much time. I know your job is to put the best face on it. And I understand the Federal Reserve's job is to put the best face on it. But inflation at 5% annualized gets my attention. When the Federal Reserve says, or even certain members, they say, nothing to worry about here, nothing to see, but by the way, we're probably going to have to raise interest rates sooner and faster than we thought. And when I see them raise the interest rate on excess reserves to get money out of the money supply, that tells me they're worried about inflation. And here's my question. Nobody's clairvoyant. A lot of these experts that you talked about never called the recession in 08, 09. A lot of these experts at the Federal Reserve, what if they're wrong? And the president has been adamant that he's not going to raise taxes on middle-class Americans. He's allowing that to happen right now because inflation, prices are rising higher than wages. And 5% inflation is a tax. It's a tax on food, it's a tax on energy, it's a tax on everything. And we can say it's temporary, but the actions of the Fed indicate to me they don't think it's temporary. Your thoughts?
Madam Secretary, I'm going to have to leave it at that, Senator. We'll have another round.
Well, others went over, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
Others went over.
Actually, they went over about the same time. Let me call on.
Can I get an answer?
On the next, we'll have another round because I'm just trying to keep everything, within the fair range here.
This may